Members, let us start the meeting of the Bills Committee on Electoral Legislation Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2015. We've already formed a quorum, and it's also time for us to start. The attending officials are already here, so let's proceed to the agenda items. Item 1 on the agenda, further meeting with the government. At the last meeting, members raised a number of questions and issues, and the Bureau has provided us with a written reply. Last time we spent the whole session on such concerns. Maybe I should give you about half an hour to follow up on those issues. I don't think it's very meaningful to repeat comments made, because I believe at the last meeting and previous meetings you have already duly expressed your views. Maybe we should ask the government to take us through the follow-up issues raised at the meeting on the 9th of June. That is paper 1707-01. I'll see whether members have further questions. Otherwise, I'll proceed to clause-by-clause scrutiny. I'll give you half an hour at most. If you repeat yourselves, I would not accord you any more time for further discussion, because at the last meeting we've already had due discussion on the issues. Under Secretary, Mr. Chairman, at the last meeting we exchanged views in detail. Today I don't have anything to add. All right, members, any follow-up on those issues? No? For those members who had more views on the issues, they are not here. So let's proceed to clause-by-clause scrutiny. Maybe we should proceed like this. May I refer you to the blue bill C798 for the Chinese version, page C798 for the Chinese version, and page C799 of the English version. The long title first. Who will take us through the provisions? Ms. Shong. Ms. Shong? Mr. Chairman, this Electoral Legislation Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2015 is detailed in the long title. It covers mainly technical amendments, covering a number of issues. The list of persons comprising certain functional constituencies, the name of a functional constituency and a subsector, the list of constituents of a subsector, the registration of voters for a subsector, and the counting procedure for functional constituency. Amendments are put forward in the bill, and there are other minor amendments. All of them are technical in nature. So this bill is rather restricted in scope. There are technical amendments covering names, procedures, lists, and so forth. Any comments? No? Part 1, preliminary. Clause 1, short title. Ms. Shong. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This ordinance may be cited as the Electoral Legislation Miscellaneous Amendments Ordinance 2015. Is that simple? Clause 2, if there's no question. Enactments amended. Ms. Chung? The enactments specified in parts 2, 3, and 4 are amended as set out in those parts. Part 2, Electoral Ordinance. Part 3, CE Election Ordinance Schedule. Part 4, the regulations under the EAC. Any questions? If not, we proceed to page C801. In order that our scrutiny work can go smoother, the Secretariat has prepared a marked-up version for us. It's easier for us to scrutinize the bill by following the marked-up version. That is paper CB bracket 21486/1415 Have you got the paper? So we'll follow it. Page 1, Cap 542, Legislative Council Ordinance. Ms. Chong. Thank you, Chairman. On page 1, we propose an amendment to the Electoral Ordinance, mainly to change the Architectural Surveying and Planning Functional Constituency to the Architectural Surveying, Planning and Landscape Functional Constituency to reflect more comprehensively the coverage of the constituency to include planning and landscape architects. All right, any comments? No? Page 2, nothing. Page 3, Ms. Chong. Thank you, Chairman. Page 3 is mainly about 20EAA. In the original version, we list out the educational institutions one by one. We would like to improve the way of expression, so we'll adopt a descriptive approach to point out that they are post-secondary education institutions covered by the University Grants Committee, and they are providing higher education and post-secondary education, and the qualifications are entered into the qualifications register under the AAVQ ordinance. That is to make the provisions clearer. And also the Hong Kong Academy for Performing Arts or the Opening University of Hong Kong and so forth. Well, there was this proposal that we should also streamline the post titles. The government has already responded to the proposal. Next, page 4, Ms. Chong. Thank you, Chairman. On page 4, the amendments are about 20E. Bracket B, bracket Roman, to include the Board of Governors of the Lingnan University, the Council of the Lingnan University. And for 12 and 13, there are also Board of Governors under the higher education institutions. Apart from the Board of Governors of the Caritas Institute of Higher Education, there are also 6 other recognized institutions. So we propose to add Roman 14 to Roman 19.
Well, there are different descriptions. There are 成員委員 in Chinese and 校董 in Chinese. Why is there such difference? Well, we've liaised with the boards, and these are their proper names. Well, perhaps it has nothing to do with the your bureau. It has to do with the EDB. Should we have a consistent way of describing the board members? Have you discussed this with them? For the present bill, we are just following their proper names. Any question? If not, page 5, no amendment. Page 6, Chairman, just like the previous amendment, we are changing the name of the FC of Architectural Surveying and Planning into Architectural Surveying, Planning and Landscape. Any question? No. Page 7, no amendment. Page 8. Page 8 is about 20V, and that has to do with the Sports, Performing Arts, Culture and Publication FC in 20G. 2 and 3, the Anglo-Chinese Textbook Publishers Organization Limited and the Hong Kong Educational Publishers Association Limited, they said that they have ceased operation and they have handed over their business to the Hong Kong Association of Professional Education Publishing Limited. So the amendments are to reflect this latest development. Are they merging? Or are they transferring their members to a new limited company? No, this is not a merger. They notified us, well, one by one, that they have ceased operation. And at the same time, there is another organization which is undertaking what they've been doing. This new organization will have its own members. We've looked at the members list, and the members are actually former members of these two other organizations. Any questions? No? Next one. Have you covered that? Next we have I. We suggest adding Hong Kong Recording Industrial Alliance Limited. Member bodies which can vote at the general meeting can become electors. We want to add this organization to reflect the latest situation of this FC. Has the number of members increased? For this organization, we include voting members at the general meeting of this body. If we add them in, then their members can become electors. Any questions? If not, page 9, no amendment. Page 10. Thank you, Chairman. We would like to amend 20X on the FC on textiles and garment. We just delete an organization which has ceased operation. Thank you. Any question? Page 11, no amendment. Page 12, no amendment. I've missed something. We are now looking at the Chinese version. Then later on, can we ask the legal advisor to screen the English version and raise any questions therein? If you have any questions, members do, you can raise them too. Page 13. Ms. Chung. We are also deleting an organization which has ceased operation. Any further question? Page 14. K2. We are updating the name of an organization. We add in the word limited. Mr. Porter. For such changes, are they made in response to the request of this organization? Or do you have an independent check to prove that this is their name, or whether they have ceased operation? How can you prove that an organization has ceased operation? Are they ceasing their operation if they hold a meeting only once? And also for this latest change, limited, the name has been changed. Is it the case that in the past 4 years that they have corporatized their organization? Now, for this change, these latest change, we are collecting the proposals through various channels. For example, the organizations concerned will write to us, say if they have ceased operation. For some other changes, the EAC staff have collected information and they are giving us such information. Thank you. Page 15, Ms. Chung. LA, again, an updating of the name. We are adding in the Chinese for words, 有限公司. There is no change in the English name because in the English name, the word limited is already included. LB, we have added in the name of the Information Securities and Forensics Society. The fellows and full members entitled to vote at general meetings of the society can become voters. Any questions? If not, Mr. Porter. Well, I don't want to appear too long-winded, but I still want to double-check. On page 15, You said the English name is acceptable because the word limited has all along been there. But in the Chinese version, 有限公司 is to be added. So in the last voting exercise, who are the people who voted? What capacity were they in? The two versions, Chinese and English, should be valid at the same time. But was it a limited company or not at the last voting exercise? Did you miss something for the last voting exercise? Or is it the case the company has not been providing you with accurate information? I think the company concerned was very reckless, and when you did the check, you had also been careless. So why is that the case? Thank you, Ms. Chung. We are taking into consideration the latest situation for this change. We have asked the relevant company and gather all the supporting information necessary. We have checked all the information to make sure that the English and Chinese names are most updated. How come that this you are doing it right this time round and not the last time? You've been checking the information of millions of voters, but then in the FC, the number was much less. And how come that is only after 4 and 5 years that you are making amends? Whose mistake was it then, way back? Ms. Chung, I don't have the information on why that we got the slip last time and that 有限公司 was not included. But the latest change we are proposing reflects the actual circumstances, and we made some checks already. A company without limited status and with limited status is very different. So what capacity were the members of the company voting in the last exercise? The name, the English name has got the word limited all along, and it's just that the Chinese name doesn't have that 有限公司. So I believe that the company has all along voted in the name of a limited company. It's just that the Chinese name is not reflecting that status. Is that the case? Yes. I'm not trying to challenge you. I don't know why you got so messy over such a minor matter. So whose fault was it? Was it the fault of the company or was it the fault of the administration? As I said, this is what is reflecting the latest situation, and the information this time is accurate. I hope that you would not come back the next time saying that perhaps we should add another word, company limited. Ms. Chung, can you guarantee that you won't come back to us next time with another name? Well, this time round we got it right. We've checked the information. Ms. Charles Mock. May I add that I've seen examples like this before. This is not the first time that we are doing such a change. My guess is that perhaps this council has been turned into a limited company or what. But my guess is that when they were first incorporated, they were already a limited company. And for some unknown reasons, when they got registered in the FC, they didn't put the words 有限公司 in. There were past amendments where some words were not put in, and then after several years, some words were added back. I don't know what the real reason is. For some associations, for their trade names, they would not like to include the words 有限公司. And I don't know why this time that the administration thinks that they should add back the words 有限公司 in. Mr. Paul raises a very good question. The company acts in accordance with its articles of association. So without the words 有限公司, people may challenge that they were not voting in the right capacity and their votes would not be valid as a result. I think we should clarify on such concerns. I hope that the administration in the future, if we add in new names, you should be more careful. This time, you add in this Information Security and Forensics Society in 1B. Have you checked whether it is a limited company or it is just a body registered under the society's ordinance, under the police? Have you checked whether it is a limited company? Would it be the case that after 4 years you would be proposing to add in the word limited here for the society as well? For this particular society, Information Security and Forensic Society, it is registered under the society's ordinance. We've asked them to furnish us with information, and we've checked it, and we are sure that it comes without the word limited. Mr. Wang Ting-Kwang. Thank you, Chairman. Some societies may be registered as limited companies, and they've asked or applied for exemption from the name of a limited company. Is that acceptable? For our latest changes, no organization has told us that they are in such a situation. So for this bill, we are not dealing with such cases. For my sector, import and export sector, the Chinese Importers and Exporters Association has applied for its name to not include the words limited. So for its Chinese name, there are no words 有限公司 in it. What about the English name? No, the word limited is not in there as well. Whether the word limited is in the name or not will not affect its legal status. Is that right, Ms. Chung? Well, because this time round we are not dealing with such cases, I can't talk about a specific case here.
In general, if a company wants to join, if it can provide the relevant documents to us, we'll follow the supporting information they give us to give them the most accurate name. Mr. Chairman, I'm not nitpicking on the Bureau, but I just want to mention such an incident, such that in future when you review the ordinance in detail, you should pay attention to this situation. All right, point noted. Dr. Priscilla Leung. Mr. Chairman, I note from the English version in particular that they're purely adding in the word limited. But in certain cases, they change LTD, the abbreviation, to the full word limited. On pages 23 and 24 for 169, the whole name is changed. Therefore, in the course of scrutiny, I'd like them to give us the detail. For example, when you want to change the name, is it because the composition has been changed? And then what about 147? LTD remains, but in the ensuing items, LTD becomes limited in full. For example, on page 42 of the English version, 147 LTD, please compare that with page 23. And other LTDs are not changed to the full word. Point taken. Well, I want consistency. I share the view of Mr. Wong Ting Kong. I'm with the Green Council. When it registered, it was known as Green Council Limited, and later it satisfied the prerequisites for a charity, so those words were taken away. So please tell us the actual substance of the amendment. When you want to retain LTD, is it because it's not yet qualified for a full word? Ms. Chong, thank you, Dr. Leong. When we looked at the names, we actually referred to the latest particulars furnished to us by the companies. For example, they'll provide their business registration documents, their company registration documents, etc. So we just accurately reflect the names of those companies. So what they provide you, you just put them in here. Yes, in some documents they use the full word limited. But what about LTD and the full word limited? Will you try to attain consistency by following the full word? Well, just now we were told that they followed the company registry's record. Well, we follow the documents of business registration when putting in these names. Mr. Paul there? Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that these are just like birth certificates. So you follow your birth certificates. Rather, is the complicated Wong in the Chinese surnames or the simpler Wong? You have to follow your birth certificates. So you really have to follow the certificates of incorporation of the companies concerned. You have to follow the names therein. Well, this does not fully answer Mr. Wong Ting Kwang's query. But for 188 and for charities, sometimes they just want to deter people. It's just like the famous singer Lao De-Hua. Some people call him Lao Hua, but in fact, he is Lao De-Hua in full. So it depends on the name registered during business registration. Just check their birth certificate, so to speak. Well, please avoid careless mistakes. Mr. Charles Mock. Mr. Chairman, after this bill is enacted, the soonest we'll have a chance to review the same ordinance will be 4 years from now. Now, I'm not just talking about the articles of association or memoranda of association. If a certain establishment changes its name, it has to notify the government. This is not just limited to, limited companies. This applies to all other establishments, societies or whatnot. So they have to inform you. So how will you go about this? Well, after this bill is enacted, we still have some time before we have the 2016 elections. Well, I don't know how long, maybe a year or a little bit more than half a year. In the interim, if a particular establishment changes its name, you won't have enough time to change the name by way of such a bill. So in the functional constituency concerned, will this affect elections among its members? Ms. Chung? Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Mock's question was raised at a previous meeting. We went back and examined the situation. Before an election, we usually have a chance of legislative amendments. So we'll take such an opportunity to tidy up the names. But of course, after a certain bill is enacted, some other issues may arise, but it's not yet time for another legislative amendment exercise. So what should happen? Usually, if the entity itself is not changed, if it is just a change of name, then the legal advice we received is that elections can still proceed. Elections should not be affected. Well, but Mr. Chairman, there are a lot of possibilities, not just elections. For elections may be like the upcoming electoral election. Oh, let me see. What about the EAC? Should we follow the same definition? Yes. So it's not just elections that are concerned. What about registration of electors? If a certain entity fails, there shouldn't be any registration of electors for that entity as well. Well, what you told us just now was that if it's not a substantial change, we can wait till the next legislative amendment exercise. All right. Any more questions? My understanding is that if there is a change of name, the name registered cannot be changed immediately, but then the old name can be used so long as there's no substantive change or substantial change or actual change in substance for the entity. Well, as I said, if in the interim there is a change of name, but the substance of the entity is not changed, still the old name can be used. But what if there is a major change? Can you still accept it? That is there a possibility that after a change in name, no elections among its members can proceed? Well, we've sought advice, and the general answer is yes. Oh yes, if the name is changed, we'll further look into the entity itself, whether or not the whole substance of the entity has changed or otherwise. Mr. Lee, any supplement on that answer? We'll say if there is a major change to the entity, then maybe the name will also be changed. Then can any election be conducted amongst its members? Mr. Chairman, I think Ms. Chung has provided a very clear explanation. Let me say that in the past we've not encountered such a situation. But usually we have a 12-month or 14-month cycle between two electors' registration exercises. As Ms. Chung said, if the legislative intent was to include that entity, then elector registration shouldn't be affected. But if, like what you said, Mr. Chairman, it's not just a technical change from LTD to limited, but a substantive change, then we need to sought legal advice from the DOJ. So for statutory bodies, this remains a question mark. Legal advisor? Mr. Chairman, I have doubts here. Qualified electors can be companies or persons or non-incorporated bodies. For a legal person, for a company, if the name is changed, then that company or legal person does not exist. So on the day of election, the entity has been disbanded. It no longer exists. Then previously, those who are qualified to vote under the previous legal person would not be able to vote again. That's my understanding. But as Mr. Lee said, maybe we should look into each and every case separately and legal advice should be sought. Anyway, the scenario is more complicated. Say if East Ocean Company is changed to West River Company, the whole name is changed. So maybe we should look into each and every case separately. Mr. Porter? Well, the legal advisor has asked about the crux of the matter. If all qualified electors are legal persons, it's simpler. You just refer to the company names registered under business registration. But if there is an association registered as a company or limited company, then when the name changes, the eligibility of its members to vote may be in doubt. In the past, they've been careless about this. Let's not talk about enhancement. It seems that they've been wishy-washy in handling names. That's why doubts have been cast on functional constituencies. Well, maybe there is still a long way to go before we can make any changes for functional constituencies. Can we have an ombudsman provision or bill? Maybe the Bureau Director and the DOJ can consider this. Elector companies registered last time, the eligibility to vote in the next election shouldn't be affected. Maybe when Mr. Zhang Sam is changed to Mr. Lei, say, so long as there is a linkage, the same person can sign the documents. Well, since the last legislative amendment exercise, if the name of a company has been changed, but the members' eligibility to vote may not be affected. So you should look into that sort of scenario. Well, that's a very good piece of advice. Page 17, no amendment. Page 18, no amendment. And then page 19. Mr. Chairman, on page 19, we have a consequential amendment. On page 13, we deleted 20ZJ. So we now change it to 20Z1A to IA.
Page 20, no amendment. Page 21, Ms. Jones. The change on page 21 is like the ones before, and that is to change the name of the Architectural Surveying and Planning Functional Constituency. Page 22. Schedule 1A. Item 4, change in the name. And items 9 and 39. The names of organizations which have ceased operation have been deleted. Well, the change in the name is rather drastic here. We know that this is a Hong Kong Drivers Training Association. Mr. Porter, does the administration have any information whether the company has changed from A to B? Or is it that item 4, that company has ceased operation and now you are substituting the place, item 4, with another organization? Well, it has just to do with the change in the name of that same body. Wow, that the change is really drastic. The union has been changed to an association. Well, in the English version, that's what it is. I think we should pay more attention to such cases. Thank you. The Hong Kong and Kowloon Taxi Companies Association no longer exists, right? Item 50. Oh, Chairman, are you referring to still page 22? Yes, item 39 on page 22. Deleting names of bodies which have ceased operation. To page 23, item 50 is updating the name. And items 69 and 89, deleting names of bodies which have ceased operation. Any questions? No? Page 24. Thank you, Chairman. Item 148, deletion of body which has ceased operation. Items 164 and 169, updating of the names of the organizations. 227 and 228, we are adding in new electors to update the FC, the latest situation of the FC. Okay, page 25. Item 2, change in the name of the body. Page 26, Ms. Chung. Item 66, an addition of an elector. Page 27, Mr. Porcher. Page 24, item 228, Hong Kong Taxi Association. Is it another case where the word limited has been exempted from the name of the body? Ms. Chung, is it a limited company or not? May I add? Hong Kong Taxi Association is registered under the Society's Ordinance and it is not a limited company. When it was incorporated, how was the way it was written in the registration certificate? Oh, it is not a limited company. It is registered under the Society's Ordinance. Thank you, Chairman. Page 27, we've already covered that. No, not yet. Page 27, thank you. Item 42, a change in the name. Items 50 and 68, deletion of names of bodies which have ceased operation. Page 28, Ms. Chung. Again, item 3, deleted, a body which has ceased operation. So much for the Cap 542 of the Electoral Legislation Ordinance. Let's move on to page 29, Cap 569, the GE Executive Election Ordinance. Ms. Chung. Part 3. It's about amendments to the schedule of the CEO. On page 29, section 2, item 2, and again, it's Architectural Survey and Planning FC, the change in the name. Page 30, no amendment. Page 31. Pages 31 and 32, the amendments on these two pages are similar to page 3 of the amendments on page 3 of the marked copy. For the relevant education institutions, we are not listing out the names of the institutions. We are adopting a descriptive approach here. In our clause-by-clause scrutiny just then, in the the electoral ordinance is the same. All right, on page 33, again, we are adding the names of, say, Zhuhai College and so on. So these are similar amendments to the amendments on page 4 of the marked-up copy. Page 34, no amendment. Page 35. Ms. Chung. This is a consequential amendment. In the marked up copy, page 26, for Schedule 1B of the Electoral Ordinance, we have added in Section 66. So consequentially, we have to mention 66 here as well. Page 36, no amendment. Page 37, no amendment. Page 38, no amendment. Page 39, no amendment. And page 40, no amendment. Page 41, no amendment. Page 42, no amendment. Page 43, no amendment. Page 44, Ms. Cho. Thank you, Chairman. We are starting with Part 4, and that has to do with the EAC regulation. And that is to have to do with the accounting procedure of District Council 2nd FC. We want to make things clearer. Originally, 74AA bracket 2, we mentioned about certain procedures of verifying the voting account, ballot paper account. We want to set out the two approaches to deal with the two different kinds of balloting stations. A, in small polling station and dedicated polling stations, the counting of the votes is listed here. While they involve normally a smaller number of votes, or here, we want to ensure that we protect the secrecy of the votes. So for our procedures, we first count and record the number of the FC ballot papers and verify the number by comparing it with the ballot paper account. And then after that, in 77A, which we'll talk afterwards, we will be mixing these votes together with the votes at other polling stations and do the counting. By doing this, we can ensure the secrecy of the votes is safeguarded. Now, that has to do with the small polling station and dedicated polling station. And B, we discuss polling stations apart from SPS and DPS. We would first count the votes, and then we will come up with the number of the votes. And then we can compare it with the ballot paper account and verify the number. So A has to do with SPS and DPS, and B has to do with polling stations, other polling stations. After A and B has been gone through the verification of the ballot paper account, and then in C we would be preparing a statement in writing on the results of the verification. Mr. Sin Chung Kai. In A, you said that at the small polling stations, you would you to be opening up the ballot boxes? You would just be counting the votes first in your table. Are you just counting the number of ballot papers distributed? You are not opening the ballot boxes there, right? Perhaps Mr. Lee can supplement. After the ballot papers have been transported to the central counting station, then we would do as set out in this section. Mr. Lee. This is not talking about opening the ballot boxes at the small polling station. The boxes will be transferred to the central polling station. Then we will open the ballot boxes and count the numbers and then verify the number. And then we will mix the ballot papers together with those in the other polling stations and then count the votes. This has to do with what we are doing at the central polling stations, counting stations, how we would deal with the votes collected at the SPS and DPS. Well, how is it different from what we've been doing in the past? That's what we did in the last voting exercise, right? It's exactly because the legislation has not been clear. In our present legislation, we don't have any particular provisions targeting the approaches undertaken at the small polling stations. So Ms. Chong was pointing out that we would try to improve on the present arrangement. Does it mean that you don't have any legal basis for what you did last time? Well, the provisions now have not set out clearly the approaches. Well, in the past voting or counting exercise, we were also mixing up the votes before we did the counting. The district council second FC election was a relatively new FC, so the law hasn't provided for the counting of the votes very clearly. Is that right? For the big counting stations, we have listed out the procedures to be undertaken. When we amended the legislation to introduce DC second FC election, we were not very clear. So this time round, in our amendment, we want to set things clearer for the SPS and the DPS in relation to DC second FC election. You will not be counting the votes at the SPS. As the votes or the ballot papers will be transported back to the central counting station. I've heard about cases where there were 34 votes identified at the SPS, but when the ballot papers were transported to the central counting station, there were 35 votes. So has that happened? Well, I don't recall such incidents in the 2012 elections. Perhaps it happened earlier than that. Would it be the case that the number of ballot papers identified at the SPS will be different from that counted at this central counting station? If that happens, what would you do? If there is a gap in the number of votes, we would first have to report that in the table or the account. And we would look at the actual number of ballot papers to decide on the ultimate number of ballot papers. Would the whole procedure or the process be delayed because of this? Because you have to do a lot of asking around. You said that there were 35 votes, but actually you found 34 ballot papers or vice versa. And what would happen? You would note that down, I'm sure, but would you be swiftly going to the counting procedure? To my understanding, we should not spend so much time on this. We would just be looking at the actual number of ballot papers in the ballot box and then count the votes and come up with the results. So if there is a difference between the number of votes recorded and the actual number of ballot papers after the ballot box has been opened, then we would note down the difference and we would ultimately abide by the actual number of votes on hand.
Mr. Sin Chung Kai? Well, I'm not looking at the marked up versions. What's the legal basis for the 2012 election? The approach you described just now is the same as that adopted in 2012. Legal advisor? Mr. Chairman, before the amendment, the version is rather general or vague. That is, count and record the number of FC ballot papers from each polling station, and then verify the ballot paper count by comparing it with the number recorded. Well, mainly, we're talking about the approaches adopted for small counting stations and dedicated counting stations or polling stations. And in the proposed amendments, more details are included. But even if these details are not included, basically, there are procedures to follow. Any more supplement from the government? No? All right, then 45, no amendment. Page 45, no amendment proposed. Page 46, Ms. Chung. Thank you, Chairman. On page 46, we propose an amendment to 77A bracket 1 capital A. Well, for bracket 1, the amendment is mainly about 74AAA bracket 2 bracket A. So consequentially, we have to update that citation. Any questions? No? Page 47. Well, on page 47, we propose an amendment for 74AA. The ballot papers will be mixed before counting. So you add in the Chinese word dai, which means big in English. In English, it is main counting station. In Chinese, it should be dai dian piu zhan. So for pages 46 and 47, any questions? No? Then we've completed clause-by-clause scrutiny. For the English version, the legal advisor will examine the details. No problems spotted, right? Up to this moment, no. Government, when would you like to go to the council? The final possible date is the 8th of July. Apparently, you have to take that date. Otherwise, we won't have enough time. So you're prepared for the 8th of July. Then I'd like to remind you that we have to submit an oral report to the House Committee on the 19th of June. And then the deadline for moving or giving notice for CSAs would be the 27th of June. As for the officials, if you really want to go to the council on the 8th of July, then you have to give notice 12 full days in advance. So that will be the 22nd of June. That will be the deadline for you. Otherwise, you can't go to the council on the 8th of July. All right. Thank you very much for your hard work. We've completed the scrutiny of the bill. Final item on the agenda, any other business? I think some members have already risen to leave, so meeting adjourned.